name's Casey Ellis. I'm the founder, chairman, and CTO of BugCrowd, and with me I have Adam.
Hi, I'm Adam. I'm an application security engineer over at the SecOps team in BugCrowd.
Cool. So here we are. The internet is on fire again. I was considering the "This is fine" backdrop for this one, but didn't get it set up before we recorded. So we'll just take that in kind. We're here to talk about the Log4j vulnerability. Log4Shell is what it's being referred to. CVE 2021 44228. It's a pretty bad bug. And when I say pretty bad bug, Australians are notorious for understatement. So when I say pretty, I mean like very. The degree of access that this vulnerability can give an attacker, combined with how common the software is and how difficult that software is to actually find, let alone update, it's a pretty kind of dangerous situation that we're in right now. So we figured we'd jump on, do a security flash, give all y'all some insight into what we're seeing, like kind of go through what's going on and how to mitigate it, how to think about it. And really the purpose of this one is for folks, wanting to get across what the risk actually looks like, how urgent they should, prioritize getting onto this and trying to fix it. And all those sorts of things. That's this one. I'm fairly sure we're going to have a follow-up because it's definitely an evolving situation as well. So Adam, what's the deal?
Okay, so the Log4j exploit is a very weird one. First off, I'm going to start with this. You will find this in the weirdest spots. I have no idea why it appears everywhere. There's a great XKCD article showing how all the world's software is built here, and then there's a little tiny dependency managed by one person down in the corner. That's kind of what this feels like a lot.
Yeah, right.
Basically, it's a log service that pretty much a huge amount of services use. You're going to find it a lot of places, sadly, because it's just a very common software, very well maintained through the Apache system. And the main thing here is that basically it passes the log message, and from there you can trigger it to make a call externally. And if you have the ability to manipulate that external location, you can get it to call in a Java class. Basically what that means is you can inject code into whatever you're running live as you go.
Yep.
And that's led to RCE.
And
it's a very interesting
just covering the acronym there. So RCE.
RCE is remote code execution. So someone else who should not be authenticated is executing code on that service.
They're doing what they want to do on your computer without you saying that's okay, basically.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Yeah, for sure. With Log4j itself, I think what I saw happen, and I even went through this myself when I first heard about it, before I dug in. Oh, that's logging. Thinking about it in terms of Splunk or ArcSight or some sort of kind of custom purpose logging software, but it's a little bit different to that. Is that a fair thing to say? Like, is this something that's a module that logs on behalf of a whole bunch of other things, or is it like if you're not doing logging, it's not there? You've already mentioned it turns up in all sorts of weird places, but I guess I'm trying to tap into why it's there.
So most of the time, this is actually error logging. Right. So you'll have this on most applications by default because you want to figure out what errors are causing issues. So you'll find this just sitting there with your standard software just because it's logging errors. It's not because you're doing security monitoring. It's just event logging.
Cool. So yeah, I mean, logging, even if it's not something that as a user you're necessarily interacting with, it is something that tends to be happening inside any given piece of software or system anyway, and this really does support that. I think is probably the takeaway there, which is one of the reasons why this particular library is all over the place, and one of the reasons we're concerned about people's ability to fix it. Obviously, the motivations that exist in bad guy land to find ways to do weird and wonderful nefarious things with it, because it's a very broad target environment. And indeed why we're talking today. So how did this all play out? Because y'all have been very busy over the past day and a half, 2 days or so.
Yeah, there's some few people who are running on only a few hours sleep today.
Powered by caffeine, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So I first found out about this, funnily enough, through Minecraft. And I have no idea why that's how everyone discovered this, but apparently that's just pretty much how everyone discovered it. Basically, someone found out that you could execute a Minecraft command and it would allow you to execute code on that server. That led people down a rabbit hole trying to figure out what was going on, which led to this whole figuring out, oh, this is on fire. Turns out this all came from a Chinese blog post, which has some story behind it as well, but we will get into that in a second.
Sure.
But the whole story of this is that because the workflow works like this, we had, I'm pretty sure somewhere around a couple of hours, because this was released, full release, just posted on Twitter, or I think it was Badu originally. So it was full disclosure.
You're talking about the exploit now, right? So
yeah.
At that point, the people that knew they'd figured out how to trigger this condition in Minecraft, they then went out and discovered that they could do it, in lots of different places, and posted effectively a one-line exploit onto Twitter.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Right.
And over time that evolved. People figured out was including files from an external source as well. And then that's expanded further to people figuring out that you can just do this with an outbound DNS request.
Right.
So you can exfil data from environment variables, things such as, on the most sensitive level, AWS keys, which are very sensitive to people.
You don't want them leaving the building. Yeah, for sure.
The earliest exploitation was actually posted on GitHub on the 9th of December, which was a day before the patch was released.
Right.
So it was real full disclosure here. And it's been exploited heavily. Like, by the time I went to bed last night, which was a little bit later, there was already mass exploitation. There was the nuclei template. There was already people writing YARA rules and everything.
Just so people writing rules for defense, but then also people writing call it templates or patterns that bounty hunters or even folk that are malicious can use to go out and scan. Is that kind of what you're talking about there?
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah. And over time, people have discovered this quite literally everywhere. The big one was Elasticsearch, which not many people expected. Turns out Elasticsearch uses this in their log4j, and everyone likes to have the ability to search their data real quick. So Elasticsearch is one of the best options for that.
Mm-hmm.
But you'll find that this is pretty much, everywhere. I think the best one was someone discovered it was in the reverse engineering software Ghidra, which that was very funny thinking about the cycle
this is
I'm going to figure out what the exploit is.
This is the NSA's reverse engineering tool, which is written in Java, right? And has this as part of it, right? Yeah, I saw that. I thought it was good of Rob Joyce to come out, so the head of NSA and Cyber Command come out and say, yeah, this is what's going on. If he'd not have been first to the punch, there could have been quite a few jokes that he would have had to recover from, because it is comical. But this is how it works, right? Like these sorts of dependencies and libraries, if there's an issue with them, then you can't really predict where they're going to turn up, because it's other people's code.
It's just everywhere.
Yeah.
Luckily, there's already mitigations out.
Yep.
There was patching on day after, which is pretty public. Exploitation wasn't really seen by us until after that patch was released, which is pretty good. The only issue is, if you thought that you were safe after the first patch, I recommend you look again, because at the moment there was a mitigation identified. So you could bypass the existing patch.
Yeah.
So it might be worth having a check, seeing which version you're on, just to make sure.
Yeah, for sure.
There's also a set of rules which make life so much easier. You can find that places that run CDNs are currently writing really good rules to prevent this sort of exploitation.
So the Cloudflares of the world, like folk like that.
Yeah, Cloudflare, other CDNs similar.
Yep.
They've written really good rules to block this from incoming, so that might help as well. But remember that your origin server, you've got to make sure that's secure as well.
Yeah, definitely.
But, patch it at the source.
A WAF rule is a band-aid, not a cure. At that point in time, you do want to be able to go back and burn down the root pieces of it. Yeah, I think something that I that struck me quite quickly. This combination of Log4j being so ubiquitous and then so like oftentimes hidden in software that maybe you've built as an organization or that's within your product, or that other people have in COTS systems that they have to go and patch before you can secure it. Like there's going to be a lot of places even within like a corporate network or a ring fenced network where this can take place, or where this vulnerability can exist. So, one of the mitigations that I saw that I actually think is a pretty good place to start, or at least consider if it's possible, is actually egress filtering. So, this aspect of all of the different ways that you could potentially cause Log4j or cause something to write a log that actually triggers the exploit in Log4j. Like there's a billion different ways to do that. So trying to prevent every single one of those is going to be kind of hard. But there is this dependency on being able to reach out using JDNI to pull in the Java class to actually execute, and that's the remote execution component of the kill chain. So the idea of blocking that, it's again not as good as updating the software itself and fixing the root issue, but as a risk mitigation step, especially for the folk that are going to lose their weekend, and chunks of probably next week, just figuring out where all this is in their environment. That seems like a good idea to me.
The other part is the ingress rule as well, because early on people identified that the egress rule was great, but what was happening was people were able to still execute the commands on that server. They just were getting a blind injection.
Yes,
So what that means is they can't see the response, and
but something happened.
that's yeah,
Yeah,
something's still happening. You're
yeah, yeah.
still executing
So it's still
code.
bad, but yeah,
Yeah. The second stage can't launch. A lot of the time, though, you can just do things with the first stage. The most common one I've seen at the moment is people are able to exfil, well, the environment variables, which are still very scary.
yeah. No, definitely.
Without the
With
first
the keys
stage.
and different stuff that you were talking about before. But again, if there's proper exfil rules, like there's been thought put into that, then you should be able to catch the exfiltration as well as block the retrieval of a second stage if you've done it right. I guess, yeah. I mean, for the listeners and folk kind of putting together a battle plan on how to approach that, I guess that's a decent way for them to think about it. It's like if that's easier and quicker as a first thing to do than going off and finding all the places where this might exist within your organization, then it's worth considering as a risk reward versus cost kind of trade off that they're making there.
Yeah,
Would you agree with that? I mean, throwing that out as an
definitely.
idea here. I've been noodling on this all day because it's such a complex bug. Like, and hearing people talk about it, it's like this is like Heartbleed, it's like Shell Shock, it's like the Slammer vulnerability, different things like that. And there's definitely to me aspects of how the last 2 days have rolled out that have felt very familiar to that. But at the same time, there's such like a almost orders of magnitude increase in the complexity of how this can go wrong and all the different places that it can be, how it can be triggered, how flexible remote code execution is once you've got it. You put all that together and it's quite dangerous in that sense. Like as an attacker, I've got a lot of options, I guess.
Yep, that's exactly it.
Mm.
And I think as well, we're going to notice this having a flow-on effect. This is probably going to last around for a while. Trying to identify all the software that has all of these dependencies is probably going to take you quite a while.
Yep.
So you probably want to run IR as well early on here, because it's
Incident
very likely
response,
that
like
this
assuming that
was,
there's been an issue. There's been
yeah,
a
because
Yep.
this was publicly released on GitHub on the 9th. There's some rumors going around, nothing proven yet, going back to March.
Mm.
So it's very likely we will see this possibly popping up in your logs, at which point you're probably going to want to run that incident response, review your logs, check and make sure that there's no actual issues going on there.
Yeah, for sure. So what we'll do again for the audience, we'll put links in with the post around different resources, things that you can look for in your logs, Adam, you just mentioned Yara rules and different things that you can look for from a filtering and a traffic standpoint, as well as some of the WAF things that have come up. I guess with the evolution of this whole thing, the other piece that struck me that I thought would be good to touch on real quick is just the difference between the discovery of a vulnerability and the development of an exploit. The idea that like when you find a vulnerability, that tends to be it's fixed, right? It's someone's code that they wrote at some point in time. It doesn't change, but then exploits get built on top of that have different capabilities. They can do different things. Then those exploits get used for different purposes. So there's almost this kind of chain of things that happen that I think oftentimes folk look at just as the one thing. Hearing people like conflate the term vulnerability and exploit, that's a thing that happens all the time because they don't necessarily think through the process of creating an exploit. What are you seeing, I guess, in terms of what we're seeing go through the platform around, call it, exploit R&D, like people doing different things to, like trying out different stuff. There's obviously the nuclei templates, what got dropped on GitHub. There's things that are known that some are just going to pick up and run everywhere. But then there's other folk that are going to take that and try to develop it and improve it themselves. Are you seeing anything in particular there?
Yeah, so I got to see the first exploit that was released. We're getting a lot of that early on, just showing off, hey, this is what we got, a very basic exploit. And then I've watched this develop over the day, everything from high quality hunting in these very interesting, quick, how do I find this vulnerability today to get a bounty, to how do I find this deeper in an application? And people looking at, am I interacting with this as a log ingestion? So maybe 24 hours from now, it gets passed on to another service that executes it.
Yeah.
We're watching people who are going, oh, is this possible via a DNS server? Is it possible via your email server? Is it possible by your, yeah, there's lots of
Yeah.
spots that this is slowly developing. And the exploitation of it is going to expand because, well, it is a very niche component that's in a lot of things.
Yeah, and I would think it would have almost like a toxic waste, like trailing effect as well. Like all of the random stuff that's being jammed into people's logs right now, even if it doesn't trigger, a condition or a like a exploit impact. When it does that, the idea of it being dumped into something else's logs down the track, and triggering the problem there or the payload there. I'm fighting for my words right now. But yeah, the idea of almost like blind XSS, throwing something in behind the lines at an organization, it bounces around and someone clicks it, 5 months later, and you get a call back. I could see this doing similar things even off the activity today. When you think about it, like there's been a lot of scanning and a lot of people just going out and trying to figure out how this thing works, and that's all generating effectively exploit code that might get like log rotated out or deleted or whatever else, or it might just stay there forever. That creates an interesting like potential future risk, I think.
Yeah. And I think we're probably going to see this expand further as well.
Definitely.
Often this is going to evolve in the next couple of months. I think we're probably going to end up with a bunch of weird vulns popping through here and exploits that abuse different parts of this application. So the early ones were using protocols such as RMI and LDAP. I think this is going to slowly expand, and we're going to see a little bit more built into this.
I
and of course, because
go ahead,
sorry. And of course, because we're seeing this happen live, it's likely people are going to be poking around at this code base as well, because which we might see more exploitation coming out, which is very scary as well. But we'll see how we go. I'm sure there's going to be a couple more vulns we see in the coming days.
Yeah, most definitely. The thing, we saw this with dependency confusion. We've seen it with even the stuff that happened around Pulse VPN and F5 in 2020. There's this kind of clustering effect. So the idea of in the case of remote access solutions, okay, here's a vulnerability in a thing, and then other people go and look at that same thing to see if there's anything that the first person missed. And in general, like if there's like, I think I tweeted this earlier today. If there's a dragon, then it's safe to assume that there'll be dragons, and there's kind of more to find at that point. But the other aspect to this, which we sort of saw with dependency confusion, it's almost like the technique, like using logging as a payload injection mechanism, as a general concept, like that idea of basically saying, oh, hang on a sec, we could potentially get RCE off all of these different things. Have we looked at the different, interpreters? Have we looked at the different filters, the different, tools that run over logs and are, treating it, potentially as unsanitized code that could be executable if it's set up the right way and there's the right kind of problem in that parser. I would expect, I mean, I've already had conversations with people today that have started work on that. They're like, oh, I hadn't thought of this. Like, yeah, of course you could do that. That's actually a really interesting area of study that I haven't really seen people look at before. And again, if this particular meltdown happened, then it's fairly safe to assume that others are potentially possible as well.
Yeah.
So that's kind of frightening, but it's really where it's up to. A lot of this has gone up. I've seen go up into conversations around software bill of materials, and the whole idea of like, do you actually know what your software is made of? A lot of people, including myself, call 2020 as the year, or 2021 as the year of the supply chain attack, and here we are again. So that's definitely, we're progressively learning the internet is actually built on top of turtles,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of shells as a result, which is, that's just kind of how that works. And we've got to basically go through and figure that out and work our way back through it. The other piece, just to call out, I wanted to add, just from conversations I've had with people in the threat intelligence and kind of call it the criminal, research space. It is now being exploited by malicious folk. That kicked off. Some of the first reports of that happened earlier today, San Francisco time. This evening, hearing from folk that it's being leveraged and coupled with existing botnets. So that suggests that the botnet as a service operators have started to integrate it in with their products, right? Ransomware is starting to happen, that's powered by it. The interesting thing on the ransomware operator side is that it's actually not being used for deployment yet. So this, I think, some of the ransomware groups have identified, kind of to what you were saying before around exfiltration of variables and secrets and things like that. It's a decent way to figure out sizing of an organization. And as a ransomware operator, I want to know how much I can ask this person for, and reasonably expect to get paid. So it's a source of intelligence for them before they go off and do an actual attack. So there's some pretty interesting things starting to happen. Like, I think that's really early. Like, that literally only started up 2 hours ago or so, and we're of course very early into all of this. But yeah, it's going to be an exciting weekend in all of the ways that we get excited about, because we're massive nerds for this stuff, but in ways that are going to be impactful, I think, for a lot of people and require thought, in terms of going back to the mitigations, which again we'll put on, we'll keep a running post of that, and folk can refer back to it. What you're actually doing to get ahead of this stuff. I think with respect to the crowd and what Bugcrowd can do, this whole idea of scanning, we've seen a ton of these come through as valid into programs already on the platform, and people are looking in places where they're expecting organizations to have not necessarily thought through that Log4j might be there, which is something that the crowd's actually really good at, right? Like the whole idea of, as a defense practitioner, you're going to be focused on the stuff you know about, because that's the sensible thing to do right now. Like, just go and you start at the top and burn things down. But all of those edge cases where you can get caught out down the track and not necessarily expect it, that's what the crowd tends to go off and find. And you get kind of leverage of that extra creativity to get as much coverage as you possibly can. So if anyone wants a hand with that, feel free to reach out and give us a shout. Contact via email or through the website. We're definitely in a position to help you get your arms around where this stuff can exist and what you need to do to remediate and reduce your risk.
That's exactly right. And the big part here is the crowd has a really good way of looking at this from an attacker mindset.
Yeah.
They're looking at this as, how do I, as an attacker, find a vulnerability in your service? And that is the same way you're going to have these criminal organizations who are trying to leverage it for monetary gain in a very non-ethical way.
Yeah.
And exploiting this in a really, really dangerous way that could cause you huge risk and harm
Loss,
to
harm, all
both your
sorts of
clients
different
and
things. Yep.
yourself. They're going to be great at hunting down those niche little issues that are going to be the ones that you miss.
100%. There's a phrase I like to throw around sometimes, that every bug's a startup, and that's true for bug hunters, who are benevolent, in the same way that it's true for people that are malicious. So that's really, I think, what folks get the opportunity to access to help them try to get ahead of this. So again, reach out. We're here to help. And Godspeed to everyone who's working on this. We're pouring out a 40 for ourselves, but you guys also, particularly over this weekend, because there's going to be a lot of people, um, you know, basically losing their weekend as they patch stuff and put all those things together. It's that's the internet. That's the thing that happens from time to time, but it's definitely happening right now. So big shout out to everyone who's on the coal face, keeping everyone else safe. We appreciate you, and thank you for digging in and doing that.
And look, good luck to everyone who's on page duty this weekend.
Indeed, indeed. All right, thanks, Adam. Yeah, so that's a wrap on this. As I said, like, look at the links, or the comments section of the post this video comes out with. We'll have a bunch of resources in there, and we'll update people. If you want to subscribe to the channel, do those sorts of things. We'll actually provide updates as we get them. Obviously, Bugcrowd's also got kind of a bird dog view on what's happening from an exploitation standpoint with this. So we're keeping a really close eye on that as things change, as we notice shifts in behavior and patterns and exploitation out of the crowd that we work with. It's fairly safe to assume that the baddies are thinking about roughly the same sorts of things. So we'll keep that updated as we learn things as this goes along. But yeah, good luck all, and good night.